In this video, Jesus preaches parables from a boat on the Sea of Galilee. This is part 24 of our series. This video begins Mark chapter 4, covering verses 1 through 9. Let's read verse 1 from the English Standard Version of the Bible. Again he began to teach beside the sea, and a very large crowd gathered about him, so that he got into a boat and sat in it on the sea, and the whole crowd was beside the sea on the land. Look at the first word, again. Jesus is back at the seaside, and he's teaching again, and once again, a very large crowd has gathered. When did this happen? How soon after his family tried to interrupt his ministry? Mark doesn't say. But for Mark's purposes as an evangelist, this is what he wants his audience to hear next. How large was the crowd? So large that it presented an obstacle to Jesus as a teacher. In a time without amplification, there are natural limits to how many people can hear a person speaking. So what did Jesus do? He sat in a boat on the water and spoke to the crowd along the shore. He took advantage of a naturally occurring amphitheater effect, where the sound carried over the water, reaching more people spread along the shore. Genius! Let's move on to verses 2 and 3. And he was teaching them many things in parables, and in his teaching he said to them, Listen, behold, a sower went out to sow. He was teaching in parables. What is a parable? A parable takes something known or understood to make something else more understandable. Parable means something thrown alongside. A parable is something familiar, presented alongside the unknown, so it can be better understood. What's the first thing Jesus said to them? Listen. The way it's used here, listen is an imperative, or a command. Jesus is putting the crowd on alert. Listen up. Pay attention. You're about to hear something important. What's the next word out of Jesus' mouth? Behold. It's another imperative, and when used literally means look, or when used figuratively, it can mean envision or picture in your mind. Why does this matter? What does it tell us? Jesus is about to say something important, and he wants them to pay attention and to imagine in their minds the imagery his words evoke. It's like saying, I want you to really think about this scene I'm describing. And what is that scene? Jesus said, a sower, or a broadcast planter, went out to sow seeds. So we know that the parable, the known thing that Jesus is using as a teaching tool, is a person who widely casts out seeds to grow a crop. This is not the same as planting row crops, where each seed is placed in a hole and covered. It's more like spreading grass seed over a bare area in your yard. You spread out lots of seed, letting it fall to the ground, and count on some of it to sprout, take root, and grow. Before we move on to verse 4, a note. Later in chapter 4, Jesus is going to explain and apply the meaning of this parable, and we'll cover his explanation in part 26 of the series. But in this video, we are only looking at the content of the parable, the known reality that Jesus wanted the crowd to envision. Don't miss part 26 to hear Jesus explain the parable. On to verse 4. And as he sowed, some seed fell along the path, and the birds came and devoured it. In the act of broadcasting seeds, each seed falls where it falls, and not all landing spots are the same. Jesus said that some of the seed fell along the path. So what? Why would that matter? What happens to a path that is regularly used? It gets tamped down and hard, and the vegetation dies off. It becomes open ground. Seeds out on that open ground are exposed and visible. And Jesus said that opportunistic birds eat those seeds before they get a chance to germinate, root, or grow. So, due to predators, some seeds never get a chance. On to verses 5 and 6. Other seed fell on rocky ground, where it did not have much soil, and immediately it sprang up, since it had no depth of soil. And when the sun rose, it was scorched, and since it had no root, it withered away. What are the characteristics of this landing spot? It's rocky and didn't have much soil. What was the effect on the seed? It sprang up immediately. It's been a while since we've seen a use of the word immediately, which Mark has used over a dozen times now. What does it mean here? It means that because the ground is more rock than soil, the seed had rapid upward growth, but little downward growth. Seeds on this ground looked promising, but lacked the required roots to provide nourishment and water. So what happens to plants with little root? They can't withstand the harsh sun and wither away. A spurt of growth followed by shriveling up and dying. Please note, the word withered here is the same word used in Mark chapter 3, verse 1, for the man with the withered hand. Part 18 of this series covers that passage in depth. Let's move on to verse 7. Other seed fell among thorns, and the thorns grew up and choked it, and it yielded no grain. What is the problem with this part of the field? Thorns, or weeds, every gardener's foe. What does Jesus say the thorns did to the plants that grew from the seeds? Choked them. Choked them how? Do the thorns have hands? No, but they have roots that compete for nutrients and water, and they have leaves that compete for sunshine. Jesus said that as a result of this competition, the seeds that the farmer wanted to grow failed to reach maturity and produce any grain. So the seed never reached its potential or achieved its purpose because it had competition for needed resources. How about verse 8? And other seeds fell into good soil and produced grain, growing up and increasing and yielding 30-fold and 60-fold and 100-fold. Ah, finally, good soil. What makes it good? That's what is fascinating about Jesus' teaching style. He doesn't say what constitutes good soil because he doesn't have to. He already pointed out what kinds of soil thwarted the farmer's purposes. The soil that doesn't have those problems, Jesus calls good soil. And when seed cast into good soil has a chance to grow, it reproduces itself. It produces grain with a vast multiplication factor. That is why you plant grain in the first place. Let's wrap up with verse 9. And he said, "He who has ears to hear, let him hear." Do you remember the first word Jesus said in this passage? He said, "Listen." Pay attention. Then, at the end of the parable, he said, "Let anyone with the ability to receive what I just said, having ears to hear, let him hear and receive it. Let him make sense of it and apply it." Here's an important point. In an agrarian society, where people are closer to the land and farming is a common practice, everyone should be capable of understanding the basic truths the parable represents. The big question is, will they apply it to what Jesus is saying and doing in the world? Isn't that the big "so what" of all the parables and teachings of Jesus? Will we not just hear it, but will we strive to understand it and apply it to our lives? This is a major theme in Jesus' teachings. There's vital truth being told, but you have to be open to receive it, process it, and apply it. As we continue in chapter 4, Jesus will explicitly lay out this theme. In our next video, Jesus explains the purpose of his parables. Thank you for watching So What Scripture. Please subscribe to the channel and share this video with your friends on social media.